In her 20s, Mary McGuire met the love of her life. Both working at the same hotel, management gave them an ultimatum. You either split up or one of you has to quit. Why? Because they were two women. Meeting her partner was a life-defining moment for Mary, and no matter how much shame she was made to feel, she wouldn't walk away from love. Being excluded is really difficult. You question everything. If I don't fit in, then where do I fit in? It can be incredibly isolating as you feel all eyes are on you for not conforming or doing acceptable things. But it's not the challenge in life. It's how you get over the challenge that defines us. What is there beyond this challenge that you can get to by growing into it? We're all here to live the fullest expression of who we are and to find our tribe. There are two roads. The one more travelled, where we conform to others' expectations to fit in and be understood, or the road less travelled, and the latter can be eye-opening and filled with fulfilling and purposeful possibilities. So on today's episode, I'm with Mary. How are you today?
I'm the very best, Talia. It's great to be here with you.
Thank you. So obviously, this is your episode. You're going to take it wherever you want to take it. So, the floor is over to you.
Great. Well, it's great to be on your show. And I love what you're about, which is about how do we look at adversity in a way that actually helps us. So I have a very strong philosophy around life, which is the challenges we face in life are not there to make life difficult. They're to help us grow. Everything we hit and every challenge we come across is something that is an opportunity for us to grow beyond it. Mm-hmm. So rather than us shying away from challenge and trying to find an easy life with no challenges, which actually would be quite boring, it's looking at what is immediately in front of us and what is that adversity and what is that telling us about an opportunity for us to grow beyond it. Mm-hmm. Now, as you know, I do a number of things. I'm a consultant for corporates. I'm a coach, mainly for female leaders, but also for other leaders. And I'm an author. And obviously, we know about my new book, The Inclusion Edge. So that's about how do we build inclusion and belonging in organisations. But one of the things I say is, one of the ways we can become more inclusive as a leader, as an individual, as a human being, in terms of the way we are, in terms of showing our humanity to others, is looking at where we've had adversity in our life. So what have been the lived experiences we've had, which have caused us some difficulty that we've had to learn from and reflect on and grow? And the reality is we all have it. There's nobody that has a life which is free from some sort of challenge or adversity. Mm-hmm. That's just not what we're about. It's more about how we learn from that. So I share lots of my lived experiences, but perhaps the one that was definitive to me, and, there was a number from my childhood, but the one that helped me to grow the most was when I experienced the difficulty of making a decision. I was working in a hotel, and I was living waitress and in with a quite a tight staff team, and we all got on really well. And then I decided to have a relationship with the chef at that hotel. And it was quite a life-changing decision for me. But what was more interesting was what were all the things that happened that spiraled as a result of that decision. And I was in my early 20s at the time. And what happened was the owners of the hotel, it was a family-run hotel, they spoke to me and they spoke to the chef and said, this relationship is not acceptable. It's undermining this hotel, it's undermining the staff team, and people are feeling very uncomfortable with it. So here's your choice. You either stop the relationship or one or both of you have to leave the job. Mm-hmm. And it's not a decision and it's not a conversation that would be happening nowadays, but that was in the 80s when that was not uncommon. And the reason that relationship was not acceptable was because it was between two women. Mm-hmm. So being gay and being in a small staff team and a tight staff team was just not acceptable. So we then had to look at how we actually handled that situation, and a series of other things that actually spiraled out of that. But one of the things that I think helped me was I am very strong. I've got a very strong personality. I've got a very strong stubborn streak, as my mother would tell you, or she would have told you, she won't anymore. But a very strong stubborn streak. So rather than, feeling, a victim of all this, mm-hmm. I was outraged. I was outraged that somebody could be like this and could speak to me like this and feel like they had that much power over me. And I remember one of the conversations that happened, and there was many instrumental conversations that happened to me around that time and around that choice. But one of them was with the wife. It was a husband and wife couple that owned the hotel. The wife who took me aside and says, "Look, you don't have to feel like you have to have this relationship. You don't have to feel like you have to stay in this relationship if it's not healthy for you." And I remember turning around to her and I remember saying, you are not my mother. You have no right to have this conversation with me. I'm an employee and I will make the decisions I choose to make about my life. Thank you very much. And if that means not working for you to maintain the relationship that's right for me, then that's what I will do. And I was 21 at the time. So I look back and I think, God, I had a huge presence of mind in terms of realizing that there was lots of people who would want to dictate to me my life terms, who would want to dictate to me what's acceptable and what's not acceptable in terms of the relationship I have, and would also dictate to me what's acceptable and what's not in terms of my employment. And I could have had a choice then. I could have crumbled under it. And it was huge pressure. The staff team became quite split between those who accepted and those who didn't. And also the sense of being judged, being shamed, things not being acceptable. And having, I was still coming to terms with who I was as a young adult, but coming to terms with how other people judged me. So I look back at it and I'm enormously thankful that I had such a big challenge so early on, because it really did help to define the strength of my character going forward. And there's lots more to the story, but I'm just going to stop there to see where you want to go with that.
Yeah, no. And I think it's interesting because, in your early 20s, I mean, at any stage of life it can happen, but especially your late teens, early 20s, you're really figuring yourself out. And, you can get confused by a lot of different things. And to go through something like that, like you said, at 21, and obviously, not being in today's world, being, years ago, it I can imagine was definitely something that was extremely challenging, because then there you are in your job, there you are, you've fallen for somebody, and you're basically being told no. It's like you have to either choose the job, choose the relationship, or actually just lose both. Which is crazy to think. Crazy to think. And I understand, like, obviously, when you said you were very strong, but kind of, do you feel that it still hit you and it still affected you?
Oh, it was only the start of the road of all the challenges that I was going to face. Which is why when I look back at it now, obviously with all of the experience I've got, I think, gosh, there was something really strong in me. There was some inherent strength in me that really helped carry me through that. And I think with all of the interviews that you've had, and I've listened to quite a few of your previous shows, that's what you hear people say, is there was some deeper strength, some deeper resource they were able to access that carried them through. And now when I look at it, I think, that's exactly what happened, because it would have been so easier to fall underneath it, feel the shame that other people wanted me to feel that this wasn't acceptable, and then to be dictated the terms by them. And I didn't. And I'm enormously thankful, because myself and my partner Joy have just gone through our 35th anniversary. And 19 years of 16 years, sorry, have been like legally together, legally acknowledged. But, she was the love of my life and she was the person I was meant to be with. So I'm enormously thankful that I didn't walk away from the love to be compliant with everyone else's expectations about how I should live my life.
Yeah.
Because it was life defining for me.
Yeah. And I think that's a key thing that you said there, is that a lot of people do dictate other people's lives, or they tell them, no, you shouldn't do this, or you should try this, or that's wrong, or that's not the norm, you're not conforming. But that's the thing, is when people do end up conforming, it's when they maybe don't find the love of their life, or they don't find real happiness because they are conforming to something that actually isn't them. Which is how I sometimes see things like that. And I think that's what happens a lot when you are excluded, and you feel, exclusion in any way, whatever it is, being excluded from something can be really, really difficult, because then you sit back and you do then question everything, because it's like, well, if I don't fit into X, Y, Z, where am I going to fit? What am I going to do? Especially if there are rules or lines and regulations which make you feel even more excluded.
Absolutely. Yeah, being in the minority and feeling you're in the minority sucks. It really does. Because what you feel is everyone's eyes are on you and they're judging you, because you're not doing things right and you're not normal and you're not acceptable or whatever it is. And that's a really isolating and tough place to be for anyone. And the fact is, we've got millions of people around the world who are in that space right now and living from that place for all sorts of reasons, because of their identity around, their sexual preferences, or because of their racial background, or because of something in terms of their ability or disability. They feel like they're in the minority. But the more we find our voice and the more we express our voice, the more we find actually we're not in the minority. And so it's very hard to find that. So finding that inner strength, and it's always there for us. The more we can connect internally to what's going on in our inner dialogue, the better. And I've got better with that as age, as I've got older, but I wasn't good at that in the beginning. But sometimes when it's been a really important moment in my life, it's always come through for me. Because the next set of conversations I had after the employer one was obviously with my parents. Less of an issue for Joy because she'd been out, but my parents were from Ireland. They were both Catholics. They had very strong religious views. My mother was quite dogmatic with her views about how things were and how you lived your life. So that conversation was an interesting one where I brought Joy and said, "This is my love of my life," and essentially was saying, "Suck it up," and they were saying, "There's no way." And it's like, okay, if it's no way, then that's fine. But, I've made my choice, and my choice is with Joy, and it is with the love that I feel for Joy. So if I have to make a choice between my relationship with you as parents and my relationship with my new partner, I choose my new partner. And again, there was a well of strength that helped me with that. But it's a very hard one, to say I'm willing to cut the ties that bind from childhood to choose a new life is a tough one. And again, there's lots of coming out conversations that children have to have with their parents. But that can be a really, really tough one. And that's what happened. And I didn't lose the relationship with them. It was always strained after that, but I didn't lose it.
Yeah. What would you say to somebody then that, is in that position where they have either just told their parents or their loved ones, whoever it is that they were worried to tell? So say they have told them and it has strained things, or they're about to and they're scared to do it. What would you say to somebody that's there because they don't want to lose whoever it is, that they're in love with, but they also don't want to lose the family or the friends that they're worried to tell?
Yeah. I think that there's different ways of looking at this, but here's what I'd say is if we think of it from a deeper perspective, we're here to live the fullest expression of who we are.
Yeah.
Full stop. All of us, the fullest expression of who we are. And if we know deep down there's a choice we need to make that is going to be fulfilling for us, that doesn't meet the expectations of family or friends or society or the church or whatever it is that actually is defining that for us, then we have a choice. We decide to live a life which is a less than full expression of ourselves, but one that makes other people happy. So we project ourselves to make them happy, or we say we've got to burst their bubble of what and who we are, but actually make a decision which is allowing us to be the fullest expression of who we are. Essentially, that's the fracture point in our life. That's the point where we have to decide which way do we go. And we've got to work that out for ourselves. And for some people, they say, okay, I am going to go down the road, which is the road more travelled. I'm going to conform to other people's expectations so I can fit in with my family, with my church, with my group of friends. And they then feel that they understand me because I'll project to them what they want. Or I can go down the left-hand road, the less travelled road, which is I say to them, sorry, I know that's what you want me to be, but that's not who I am, and I'm going to go down this road. I'd really like to come down the rest of the journey with me, but if you don't, I'm going to have to accept that. So they are two fracture points, and both of them mean that you can continue living your life, but it's just at what depth and at what level of satisfaction.
Yeah, and I think the road less travelled, I think if you choose to go onto it, it can be one of the most eye-opening, fulfilling, purposeful, travels and roads that you can ever go down. But
Mm.
I think you don't necessarily see that at the beginning, but maybe once you are there, you're on it, and that's when you start to realize it.
Yeah. And that saying, feel the fear and do it anyway. It is one of those points where you've got to work out whether I want to grow beyond this adversity or not. Yeah. And not to say it isn't difficult. And sometimes, if there's people listening and, there's cultural issues or family issues, which mean that they won't be safe fully expressing themselves. Mm-hmm. They've got to think about that, about how do I balance a point where I get to a point of safety and get to a point where there's enough support around me to fully express myself? Because sometimes you've got to have them considerations. But for most of us, our physical safety isn't the issue. It's our emotional issues. It is what is there beyond this challenge? And that's a better question to have. Not how will my parents react, or how will my friend react, or how will society react. It's more about what is there for me beyond this point of challenge that I can get to by growing into it.
Yeah.
Because I can say from my life, what was it that grew beyond it? First of all was finding the love of my life. Yeah. Secondly was getting a level of support in my life that was way beyond anything I'd experienced before. And as a result of that, I had a platform in which to grow, in which to grow emotionally, intellectually, from my career, from the opportunities that came to me. All of them things came because of that point of recognizing what was the choice I was making.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I was just about to ask you, where did your life go after making this decision? And obviously now you've written the books, you've written the book, The Inclusion Edge, which obviously talks all about this, doesn't it?
Absolutely. And there's more books in me. I've always wanted to be a writer, but I think it's more, what is it I have as experiences and understanding and insight that I can bring to other people? So I've been 23 years in business, and in that time I've been working with different global companies on their big change challenges. Before that I was a social worker. Within that I helped, people with multiple disabilities by running organisations and services. And now I do much more coaching and individual development as well. So the books are about how can people change their life positively? What can they do? What are the actions they can take to help them to move their life in the right direction? So the Inclusion Edge, I thought about it in terms of people who are in organisations, in business, and want to make changes. But to be fair, it helps everyone. That's what I'm hearing from people. It doesn't matter whether you are in business or not. It makes us aware of our humanity. It makes us aware of how we can find the compassion to recognise people who are in a situation that's more vulnerable for us because they're in some sort of minority group, and how we can help them practically to live their best life by the actions that we take.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think because that's the thing, is it's whether it is your sexuality or whether it's gender, whatever it is that makes you feel excluded, I think ironically what it is you can feel so excluded or you can feel so alone, but there is so many people out there that are probably going through exactly the same thing as you, or even not exactly the same, so similar that actually it's not as lonely as you might think it is, because there are people out there doing the exact same thing. But it's finding those people and understanding that, whatever you're going through, you're not alone.
Correct. Absolutely. But you have to start expressing it to understand who them people are. So your tribe comes to you when you've identified with the tribe.
Yeah.
But staying behind, some facade and pretending you're not part of that tribe means the tribe can't find you.
Yeah, I like that. I like calling it a tribe. And I think something really interesting that you said before is that you found this inner strength. And I think everybody has this inner strength. A lot of people don't know it. A lot of people have absolutely no idea where it is. And sometimes when they use it, some people have no idea where it even came from. But I do think everyone does have this deeper inner strength from whatever it is, whether you're born with it or whether it's things that you've developed from your childhood and whatever you've been through. But sometimes when you are forced to use it, you don't realize how strong you are. And I think a lot of people have that. It's, again, like the quote, you're stronger than you think. I do strongly believe that is so true, and that so many people are so much stronger than they think, that they can get through a lot more than they will ever think they can't.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, hence your podcast. Your podcast is all about encouraging people to see life in that way.
Yeah.
It's like, it's not the challenge, it's how you get over the challenge.
Yeah.
I got back up. I mean, it's brilliant, because that's absolutely true.
Yeah. And I think you said right at the very beginning, it's about when you're faced with challenges in life. And yeah, we don't all have a very easy road. Some people's might be slightly easier, but it's about being uncomfortable it's being comfortable in being uncomfortable, if that makes sense. So learning how to become comfortable in doing things that are uncomfortable. And when you do those things that are uncomfortable, that is when you see the changes. That's when, even if it's a small little change one day, that is when you start to see the changes, is when you are putting yourself into those slightly uncomfortable positions that you thought you couldn't do or you didn't want to do.
Yeah, completely. Because it's never the challenge that defines us. It's how we respond to the challenge. That's what defines us. It's how we respond. It's with everything, how we live our life, how we think about the world, how we respond to people around us. That's the definition of us. So when we go deeper and think, if we're experiencing, if we're facing a fear or experiencing something that feels overwhelming or has a really difficult decision to make, the best thing we can do is just go inwards, as in just take some time and quietness and think, what is the best thing I can do here that will be the thing that serves me? Mm-hmm. What's the best thing I can do that serves me? And we will always find something will come up, some nudge, or we'll find ourselves responding, or we'll be looking at something, or we'll be speaking to somebody that will just be the right thing for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Definitely. And do you think also, do you think things maybe in your childhood helped you become, who you are today?
Without a doubt. So I mentioned the stubborn streak. I came from a very difficult childhood. So it was a very dysfunctional family. It was in inner city Birmingham, in a council house, not exactly an estate, but near enough. And as I said, my parents were Irish immigrants, so there was still a lot of tensions between English and Irish then, as there was with lots of other immigrants that had come over to England. And my father was an alcoholic, my mother was neurotic, I had a sister who had autism and was non-verbal. So there was lots of challenges in terms of the way that we were seen as a family, but also the very rough area we were in as well. And I had to find some strength in me pretty much every day to get through things. I was bullied at school and things like that. And the strength was there. But what I also realised, and again, this is something to do with me, is when I look back on my childhood, I don't see it as trauma. There was trauma in it, without a doubt. What I see was all of the things that made my life funny or enlightening or gave me experiences which brought huge insight when I went into the corporate world. So having that childhood, then going into social work and seeing lots of children in lots of horrendous situations, I have to say, and their difficulty meant that we can look at life in lots of ways, but two ways we can look at it. We can say life is crap and horrendous and there's nothing we can do to make it better. Or we can say, gosh, this is really difficult. I wonder what I can do to make this better. With ourselves, with situations, with other people. And I think I've always gone into situations and said, okay, what can we do to make this better? Just a simple question. And as a result of that, even with my childhood, I see lots of glimmers of light, lots of good, positive situations amongst all of the other things that were crappy. And as a result, I don't carry trauma with me. I don't have a huge lot of baggage about how awful I was, what a victim was. I just think, God, there were some funny situations there. And if I can key into them, I can make almost any situation funny.
Yeah. And I think that's, you hit the nail on the head in a way that it's finding the tiniest, smallest of happiest moments in even the darkest of situations sometimes, because those tiny little moments are the moments that can carry you through.
Yeah.
Whether you see it or not, but they really can.
Yeah.
You can hold on to them, and whether it's in a week or a month or years to come, you'll look back at them and you'll just, if you held them, close, and they made you happy, they make you happy even in years
Yeah,
to come. So
exactly. Yeah.
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 So, do you have any advice then for, somebody that is going through, especially within the minority, somebody that is going through something, and they don't have those glimmer of hopes yet, or they don't have those little moments, and they don't see the light yet, and they are worried about the future. Kind of, what would you say to them?
What I would say is, first of all, if you're feeling isolated, if you're feeling on your own, if you're feeling that there is no way out, is there's a few things. One of the things is acknowledge the fear. Acknowledge the fear that you feel, because what happens with fear is we often push it aside and pretend it's not there, and then that rules us. The more we push away, the more it actually rules us. So acknowledge the fear, but then actually get behind it and say, well, what really am I fearful of? What is the worst thing that can happen in this situation? And then how would I cope with that worst outcome? What would I do if that was the worst outcome that came? Now, obviously, we assume the worst outcome is somebody's going to die. Most of our outcomes are not that somebody is going to die. Clearly, if that's the outcome, we need to think of something different. But it often the outcomes are to do with our job, to do with our career, to do with our family, to do with our relationships, to do with how other people see us. They're the things. And it's like, once we can get beyond that worst outcome and say, but what else could happen? And think about some of the things that could happen which aren't the worst outcome. That could be other outcomes. And that sitting in the possibility of something other than the worst outcome happening. Sitting in that and thinking about that, and then how would I feel if that was an outcome for me? As in something different from the worst outcome. How would I feel? What would that make me feel? And always follow the emotional path. We're often told we shouldn't let our heart rule our head. We absolutely should, because our heart is the better intelligence. And there's loads of science telling us that now. It's not our brain, it's our heart is a better intelligence. Because following the emotional path, and I don't mean the fear, I mean the one of growth, will always lead us to a better outcome. But we have to sit in the pain and sit in the fear first, and then look at, but what else is there? What else is behind that I could get to that could help me to grow into the person I want to be?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, is the head knows right or wrong. The head knows what's right, what's wrong, or, but the heart is what, the heart is what makes you feel, and it makes you think, well, this might be wrong or this might be right, but my heart knows what it wants.
Yes.
Yeah, I like that. Follow your heart. So is there anything else that you'd like to discuss today?
No, I'd just like to say both the Female Edge and the Inclusion Edge are out there on Amazon. And if I've inspired you to think differently about your life, do go and have a look at them. And I hope they'd be of value.
Oh, well, thank you very much. It's been an absolute pleasure to have you on today.
Thank you, Talia. My pleasure as well. Thank you.